First, because each member of this board is participating in the meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I am going to conduct a roll call and ask each board member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. I will start. I'm Barbara Naif, and I am speaking from Reston. Ann Stunts.
Carol Herrick, Providence, McLean.
Right. I called for Ann. Ann Stunts. No, she's here.
She said so.
And you have to unmute yourself.
Ann Stunts, Vienna. Right. Phyllis Walker Ford.
Clifton, Virginia.
Phyllis.
Phyllis, could you repeat yourself, please?
Walker Ford, Clifton, Virginia.
Thank you.
Okay.
We've heard from Carol Herrick already. Mike Irwin. I believe Mike is absent. Cheryl Ann Rapetti.
Cheryl is not on the committee, Barbara. She is
I do that every time. I apologize. Tammy, I did that last time as well. Excuse me. Tammy Marinero. Can she hear us?
This is Tammy Manarino. I'm in Mount
Thank
Vernon,
you.
Virginia.
Thank you. And Greg Wilson?
Greg Wilson here in Great Falls.
Thank you. Elizabeth Kroll?
Liz Crowell in Alexandria.
All right. And Denise, are you here?
Yes, Denise Dressel. I'm in Haymarket, Virginia.
Thank you. And Matthew Knox?
Matthew Knox, I'm in Reston, Virginia.
Thank you. I'm at this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the commission chair, Ann Stunts, so that I may be heard to make the
Barbara, I'm Mary Lipsy in Springfield.
I apologize, Mary. Mary Lipsy, are you here?
Mary Lipsy in Springfield.
Thank you. Now, at this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the commission chair so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of this board. I have a second?
Second, Herrick.
Thank you. All in favor, yes? The need for an election.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Next, a need for an electronic meeting. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this board to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of this board and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that this board may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated telephone line and that the public may access this meeting by WebEx virtual meeting. A 10-day call-in, 1-408-418-9388. Event number 129-508-495. It is so moved. Need to dispense with FOIA's usual procedures to assure continuity in government and government and continue operations. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the state of emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of this board's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved. I will take the gavel back. Thank you. Now, I'd like to offer some quick chairman's comments.
Barbara,
Pardon me?
do
Yes.
we have to second it and vote on it?
It's so moved. So yes, if you'd like, yes, I guess we do. This is the
I always,
meeting
I
that I
always forget.
found so difficult.
Yes.
And are you seconding?
Sure, can I do it? It's stunts.
That's fine. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. With apologies, I'm moving on to the agenda. For the benefit of our visitors, I want to offer a few chairman's comments. The commission has established this Confederate Names Committee, or CNC, of 8 commissioners. We are tasked with defining the scope of our research and its methodology. We have begun identifying research sources and contacting prospective research partners from various public history groups within the county. The actual research and matching of Confederate names with streets, monuments, markers, and public space places is being pursued by the full commission as a committee of the whole. Supervisor Palchik, we welcome you to our meeting. We trust you will find our discussions of interest, and we look forward to any comments or thoughts that you may have. Welcome as well to Matthew Knox. Matthew has been serving as an internship with Supervisor Alcorn, who has graciously offered Matt's services to the commission to aid in our research. From there, Supervisor Palchik, any thoughts, or would you like to just listen and comment later? The floor is yours.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate it. I know we've given you quite the task this year. You can thank Supervisor Alconradi later, but in the meantime, I'm just delighted to be here, happy to answer any outstanding questions. I know this is a project that has both, short-term and possibly some long-term implications. And so let us know any way we can support you. I know Arya from my team is on here as a participant. I think he could not log on as a panelist. I don't know if you're able to upgrade him, Denise, but he is here as well, and he's supporting me in my office.
Thank you very much. Anyone have questions, or shall we move on and Supervisor Palchik may join at any time? Does anyone have any specific questions for her? All right, if not, let's move on to the minutes. I have the minutes from our meeting on July 10th. They have been shared with all of the committee members. If there are any further corrections, please say so. Otherwise, I need a motion to approve them.
This is Mary Lipsey. I so move that we approve the minutes.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Greg. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to our business, and I've asked for staff reports. We will start with Denise and then and go on to Liz Kroll. Denise, please.
Go. Give me just a minute. I am running and staffing, and there we go.
Okay.
Thank you. So the staff report covers everything that the Confederate Names Committee has been doing up to this point. So it's comprehensive, but I thought it was a good idea to get a grasp on where we are, where we stand now. And I do understand that some of the committee members will be reporting out on some of the same things that I touch on, but maybe in more detail. So forgive the repeated information. The task completed or in process so far, a media plan has been created for addressing press and public inquiries. A web page has been set up for the Confederate Names Committee, which will be updated regularly as the committee moves forward in its work. A letter has been sent to the towns of Vienna, Clifton, and Herndon, as well as to 13 relevant local historical groups to request their assistance in research and data collection. A letter is being drafted to the chair of the Architectural Review Board for their support and involvement in formulating guidelines for the renaming process. A draft template has been created to identify and record information about Confederately named resources. This template will be used to standardize data and will be discussed later in today's meeting. A draft list of approximately 1,745 well-known or locally significant Confederate names has been created. Also for consideration are general Confederate terms such as Confederate or rebel. The Park Authority has provided a final list of 15 Confederately named or Confederately associated Park Authority owned properties. A list of approximately 100 Civil War related historical markers, monuments, and plaques in the county has been compiled. A list of county-owned or leased buildings, 236 and 200 respectively, has been generated. A list of county street names, 17,227 by magisterial district has been generated. Lists have been generated for 7,883 subdivisions, 1,418 civic associations, 253 shopping centers, 164 golf courses or non-FCPA parks, and 559 general place names. Staff, along with Barbara Nafe and Greg Wilson, met with Matt Knox and Gwen Minton from Supervisor Alcorn's office to discuss Matt's first assignment of standardizing the name convention used in the Confederate names table and eliminating duplicates. Matt's internship has been extended through the first 2 weeks of August, and Gwen felt that Matt could be available for approximately 30 hours per week for the next 4 weeks. Staff has begun to compile policy statements on the treatment of Confederate memorials, including guidance from the Department of Historic Resources and the National Trust. Staff has begun to gather information on the identification of responsible agencies, as well as the processes for renaming, removing, relocating, or contextualizing the street names, monuments, and or places, if the board so chooses, which so far includes the Commonwealth Transportation Board and the Park Authority. And finally, a public hearing on the potential removal, relocation, or contextualization or covering of the Marr Monument, 2 howitzer cannons, and DHR marker located on the courthouse grounds will be held on September 15th at 4:30. Staff will be writing the advertisement for that public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Does anyone have questions at this time of Denise?
Denise, is that September 15th going to be virtual?
Oh, that's a good question, Mary. The last board meeting was actually held in person. I don't have an answer to that, but I will certainly get that answer for you.
Okay.
Anyone else? You all have to let us know because, again, I can only see boxes here. All right, thank you, Denise. Very thorough and most appreciated. Gives us a sense of some accomplishment. All right, Liz, can you offer an update from your staff report perspective?
Certainly. A total of 15 place names, names of Park Authority owned places or buildings were identified in the table. They were actually first identified at the time of the incident in Charlottesville to basically look at what what things that we had that were identified with Confederates. That table has since been added to and updated, and the version of the table that you have, the members of the committee has, is based on a table that was compiled in late 2019. At this point in time, I am working with members of the Park Authority to discuss potential for changes to the names of the properties on that list and how one would go about enacting that. So coming up with procedures of how the Park Authority would go through name changes if that's something that is desired.
Thank you, Liz. Questions of Liz? All right. The next is progress reports, and I hope all of the committee members received an email that I sent yesterday explaining what we're hoping you can offer. To explain briefly where you are in your research, what you're concentrating on, what resources you are using, and what problems or challenges you have had at this point. The point is we are working together separately in this time-driven assignment, and so sharing where each of you is at this point is crucial, since everyone is dealing with varying circumstances and topics, and we have to build towards one report. Who would like to start?
Barbara?
Greg, I'll call on you. I'll call on you, Greg.
Yeah, thank you. And I will be brief in light of Denise's report, and I'll apologize to the group. I'm involved with another transaction, so if I have to pop off here at some point during our meeting, I apologize, but I'll get back on as soon as possible. With respect to the list of Confederate names that we're compiling, that Denise mentioned, we're upwards of 1,700 names now. I think the headline news there is that we're pretty much wrapping up as much as can be expected, and have a pretty good working list that we can carry forward into what we've talked about as phase 2, where we begin to compare that list with all the place names here in the county. There may be some duplicate names in there, and so we're in the process between Denise and Matt. They're going to be sorting those out to compile with a single master list based on 8 major sources of information that we've pulled together, and this is all available in the Excel spreadsheet that I've sent around. So right. I think we're in good shape from having most of the names identified that we're going to care most about. Very much wanted to thank everybody for all the contributions, particularly Denise and Mary, who have done yeoman work to help feed in names to the ones we've been collecting. And I'll thank Matt for joining the team. He's going to have the carry a big responsibility here going forward with the work of actually doing the final sort, coming up with the final master list, and then working through the process of comparing it to the place names. So let me pause there and answer any questions or take any comments that anyone may have.
Anyone feel free to speak, ask Greg anything at this point? All right. Thank you, Greg, very
That's
much.
my report.
Hey, wait,
All right.
wait, I had to mute myself and then I had to unmute. This
Oh,
is
all
Ann.
right. All right. Go ahead, Ann. Sorry.
And I wanted to say, I think this is a wonderful list. It's been fun to watch it evolve. My question is, I mean, we'll probably get to this later and we'll probably do it over and over again, but is this doable? Like 1,700 lists and then 17,000 plus 500, call it another 25,000 place names and street names. Ooh, more than that. Is this going to work?
I would answer yes. I'll let Matt speak, who will be doing the actual sorting and review. We'll all do the review, but the short answer is yes. It will take some effort and work, but it's doable.
But for Matt, for Matt's job, he's gonna, between Matt well, Matt, it's on you this next step, isn't it? To just give us the core list to then, I mean, we all are kind of thinking about and looking at our own districts anyway, and we know the obvious ones. But we'll end up with this amazing list of possible Confederate names, right?
Correct.
It'll be names that are the same, and that's all we can say to start with.
Correct.
Is
Correct.
that right?
Yeah.
And
And
then
Matt, you may want to say a few words about the process we talked about on Monday when you and Denise and I spoke, and Barbara. You might just explain a little bit about how you're going to take this forward.
Sure. So Denise and I put together a general plan where we're gonna have the general list of names and then ultimately match it up to the Excel file of all of the street names, and then from there we'll have possible names, and then we can from there sort through them to see if they are indeed the Confederate names. So at the moment, I don't think we know a specific amount, but I think in the next week or so we'll have an idea of how many actually there are.
yeah. And then so there'll be there'll be a lot of ordinary names, and then there'll be ones that are real some we'll never get to the bottom of, and we all know that. Just like the Cooper example. All right. Well, I thank you for helping me clarify that, Matt, and Greg, because I think once we get to that next step, and if that's in a week, that'd be fantastic. And then we can if we can divvy it up, we can really eyeball it and do our thing and see what we get. All right. Sorry to interrupt, but I needed that.
That's a good question.
I'd like to add something, Mary.
Mary, go ahead, Mary.
Going through Brothers and Cousins, which is Paige Johnson's compilation of names, there are a lot of names there that I cannot see a Fairfax County connection. But because they weren't on the original list, they are now on my list, okay? Because there may be one. I put one for an example with Greg, and the only thing I could find possibly is that he's born in Alexandria, and maybe it's a portion of Alexandria that once was part of Fairfax County. So I don't know how technical or, in the weeds we want to get with these, but I'm just telling people that was what I was finding as I was going through that source.
All right.
Well, again, just to jump in there quickly. So Mary, you raise a valid point. We'll have to look through that. But again, the mandate from the Board of Supervisors wasn't wholly related to Fairfax County, correct? So Froebel was a Confederate officer. I can go back and check. I thought their property was in Fairfax County in the West End. But we can check on things like that.
Okay, all right.
Whenever all the other questions are done, I want to offer a caveat. Are there other people that have questions for Greg? No? All right. I refer us back to the amount of information that you have collected, Greg, is amazing. But I refer us back to not only the fact that we're looking for well-known names, but also, as I've said before, we are in such a tight time crunch here. We are doing research that should take a year, and we basically have 3 months. What I did ask Denise was approximately when we would need to give her our information, because she has to put all of this together into her report. And she feels that it is our October History Commission meeting, and October History Commission meeting is on October 1st. So we have quantity, but within the quantity, we have to find the quality in terms of names. The streets, the names are critical, and then we go to the street. So I'm just sharing with you what our circumstances are. And when this happened a month ago tomorrow, they need the report the end of the year, and that was December. And I think we all sort of thought December, but then you go backwards to the time it takes to prepare the report and get it approved to get to the Board of Supervisors, and the time it will take Denise, whose assignment it is to do it. So everyone has to keep that in mind. I don't have a particular solution at this point, but that's for all of us, but it's important that we keep that in mind. This is our best effort in a time-driven time, but we have to prioritize and we have to integrate all of the information we're getting. And that's what, once we get past here. So just sharing, being realistic. So
Barbara,
yes, who's this?
it's Ann. I can give you 6 more days because the first meeting looks to me like October 7th.
Oh, I thought it said October 1st. I went to my calendar. I beg your pardon, October 7th. You are right. We have 6 more days. I looked at my little calendar and I was wrong. October 6th. Thank you, Ann. October 6th. There we go. All right.
Barbara, if I may,
Yes.
if we're counting days,
Who is this? Tammy?
this is Denise. I'm sorry. I forgot that you can't see. It's Denise.
Oh, I'm sorry, Denise. I should recognize your voice by now. Okay.
So if
Go
we're
ahead.
counting days and hours and minutes, October, the 1st of October is an idealistic cutoff time.
Understand.
That has a little margin in it for as research wraps up and things that we need to do. So I thought the History Commission, the first meeting of the History Commission in October was a good time to sort of put the History Commission on notice that we have to stop researching. Put down your pens. It's time to compile. So if there is a little margin in that date. October 7th, October 10th, maybe October 10th would be a better date. But just the first weeks of October, we really need to stop researching and start compiling a report. So thank you.
Right. Thank you. I'm trying to make my point, and with as much levity as I could find under the circumstances. So, but thank you. We'll say, but between the first week and a half of October, how's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyone else for Greg or for this? If not, we'll go on. Carol Herrick, would you like to offer your progress report?
Barbara, just one quick follow-up.
Sure, Greg. Go
Has
ahead.
anybody, let's take street names as an example. Has anybody been in touch with the Department of Transportation to know if they keep track of how street names came into being? I just wonder if we're going to find those how much of those kind of facts we're going to find. But obviously I haven't talked to anybody at the Department of Transportation or whoever manages street names.
That's through Denise.
This is Carol, and I guess I'm next, but I'll answer that question a little bit. Greg, there was a book written by Milburn Sanders, and he listed all the streets in Great Falls and why they were named the name they were. Unfortunately, the Virginia Room doesn't have it, and the Great Falls Library doesn't have it. And it's kind of, excuse me?
I just said, oh dear.
Oh, okay. And so there is that, if I can get my hands on it. Chris had been at the Virginia Room, had been contacted years ago about this book and or about Milburn's items, and he doesn't have them, and he doesn't have the name of the person to contact. So I'm trying to track that down. That would really be cool.
Yeah, that's fine for Great Falls, but there has to be some central repository for street names. And again, the question for Denise maybe, that is it either going to give us some guidance or it's not.
Right. So what I can do, Greg, is go back to FCDOT. I do have a contact there who is working with the board. Let me say the right name of this board. The Commonwealth Transportation Board. So I do have a contact with FCDOT that is in touch with the Commonwealth Transportation Board, and I can ask her either is there an archive or is there some kind of record of names and how they are named. Or just ask for direction. I started that conversation with a representative from VDOT, if you remember my last report from last meeting. But VDOT has been overwhelmed with requests from localities for this particular topic. So they've gone back to look at their policy, and their policy and procedures are being reviewed by the Attorney General. So I think we may have a source in VDOT's records, but I'm not sure because they're in review now. So, but I will go and check that and report back to the committee of the whole, because all of you will need that information.
Great, thank you.
Good, I remember looking at some of the subdivisions in Vienna and from the 50s and 60s, and you look and find the plats and things that were approved, and you could look at some of the planning and zoning approvals, but there wasn't anything else that I ever found helpful yet. But maybe it's there and I never found it.
This is Tammy.
This is Mary.
I was talking to Heather Bollinger about this a few weeks ago as I was doing the research on Cooper Road. And she was talking about how in the 1960s there was a standardization of road names. And in fact, Chris Barbashek, he might have provided it to all of us, the old names, new names report that came out of the Board of Supervisors. I think it's 1963 or 65. And really the only information that has is how things were changed from one to another to deconflict the road names.
Yeah.
From what I understand, it was really only turned over to the Department of Transportation in the 60s. So anything that was named before that, it's just going to be our county records, I think. That's my understanding.
This is Mary. In doing Bragg's True Gold, we ran into the same questions about where street names were named in Braddock District, and did some research. And what we heard is that the developer submits the names, and they make sure that there's no repetition, in the area, but there is no record of why he chose the names he did. But that was from Braddock District.
That's what I've heard.
And this is Liz Crowell. I can add on to that prior to joining the county, when I was working for an archaeological consulting firm, on more than one occasion, I was asked by developers for suggestions for road names that would either be based on things historical or archaeological.
I'm not sure. Denise and Ann may have seen it, but this is Cheryl Rapetti. She's been working on Sully, and she contacted Deb Robinson, and through them came a report about name changes, road changes in 1964, which I think is what you're referencing, Tammy. And it ended up with 481 streets renamed, but it does not tell you, what they went from one to the other. So that's, I think, the report that you're referencing, and whether that would provide help to us or not, I do not know.
No, it's just names. There are some records in historic records that Georgia Brown was sort of giving me a tour of when I was there, and it's basically petitions.
Okay.
Where somebody's petitioned for a change, and so there's sometimes some more information, but it's hit or miss. It's not going to be there for everything.
Well, I think what we're able to find is fine, and I think that the supervisors would appreciate that, but it may be that we aren't able to, to actually locate that.
Yeah, no, if I may, sorry, Supervisor Pelton. No, I appreciate that, and again, I think we are understanding that, first of all, prioritizing this project is going to be critical, and definitely we know that the street's name is going to be pretty large endeavor, right? And so the reasoning at this point, I think, is less critical, unless it really helps understand when there's a question of whether or not it was named after a Confederate figure as described, but definitely being able to get as much of that information as we can on anything that's on or owned by the county. As you know, the roads board turned over to VDOT. Got a really good history lesson from Tom Bichadny on why that happened back in the 60s, whether or not we agree with it today. But yes, I think any additional information that you do gather, like, is very helpful, but at minimum to be able to show what we know of a name being or not being for a Confederate figure as stated, and then, you know, having a place to have this be more of a living document, right? Because I think we'll have more information as you and other history buffs come forward with that.
But thank you
This is
so much.
Mary. This is Mary one more time.
Yes,
We
Mary.
were discussing this with my husband, and he said when the growth, you know, of Fairfax County exploded in the 60s, was also the centennial for the Civil War.
Right.
So we may have had it on our mind, is what he was saying. And I thought, well, that would make sense, that maybe a lot of names came about when, you know, new streets, new homes are being built, and it's also the Civil War centennial.
That's a really
Right.
good point. That's such a good point, because there were several National Geographics, lots of Life magazines. It was just all over the national press, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something we're going to have to look at, because people have pointed out before that a lot of these monuments were erected in the 1960s, you know, coincident with the civil rights era, and that happens to be coincident with the centennial. So parsing out, you know, the intent is really tricky.
Very difficult. Thank you all. Anything else there, or should we move on to, Tammy, would you like, since you almost have the floor, to go ahead?
Sure. I was going to say a lot of my time has been spent on just developing that template and working
Yes.
with Denise and others in getting that together. It was a good exercise, I thought, to go through and come up with the examples and see how they worked
Yeah.
within that system.
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, as we share with our partners, you know, hopefully it'll give them an idea of the depth we're looking for, which is not very deep at this point. We don't want to spin our wheels too much. Aside from that, I really have just started to do research within the Mount Vernon area. It's one of those things where we'll see if my expectation, comes true. But my expectation is, because this is the Mount Vernon district is one of the areas that voted against secession for the Civil War, there was a large Quaker population here that we're not going to have a ton in the Mount Vernon area. We'll see whether that comes true. One of the first places that I went to was our inventory of historic sites, because I thought, well, let's hit the big things first, and let me see if there's anything in the Mount Vernon district that seems to be named for a Confederate. I did not see anything as I was going through, but I did have one thing that popped up, and this kind of goes to our scope. When we had talked last time about the questions guide that we'd put forward to Supervisors Alcorn and Palchik.
Yes.
Item 3 on that list talks about the example of Frying Pan Meeting House and association or sympathy with the Confederacy. And so when I looked at the history inventory with that in mind, whether locations of Confederate activities or sympathy, there are a number of things on our history inventory. This was very much a mixed area where we had some Union and some secessionist families living side by side. And so there are items there. And so I guess my question is, it seems to me that that if we try to add those to our list, we might have a very uneven list where, we just don't have time to get to all of them because we're going to have so many. So I guess I'm looking for a little clarification there. I'm very comfortable with the process of going through Confederate names and identifying things that have Confederate individuals' names associated with them. But if we branch into that area that was on number 3, association or sympathy with the Confederacy by civilians, I think that is a can of worms that we might not want to get into at this point. So, so I guess that was just my point of discussion that I came up with from the little bit of research that I was doing this week.
If I may, I actually phrased that question because my own sense was the history and importance of Frying Pan Meeting House definitely predates the Civil War, but because of the area in western Fairfax County, and because it's one of the places that Mosby was around, and Mosby is, you know, is a folk hero in at least that part of the county. That's why I referenced it. But I would agree with you. It's not the significance of Frying Pan Meeting House is its early date and its purposes, and you know, available for it was an integrated congregation and all of that. So, Greg, yes.
Yeah, so I thought we agreed on the last call that what I'll define as Confederate sympathizers, as Tammy indicated, we were defining out of the set of names for Confederate officers and civilians who served in the Confederacy. Otherwise, you're dealing with a whole different, greater
Agreed.
population. Everybody that voted against or voted for secession, whether they joined the government or not, would be included. And we actually
Correct.
have those records. They're sitting in historic records. But
Right.
Defining somebody's loyalties who was not in the military or in the government, I just think goes beyond what is reasonable, certainly, and goes beyond the mandate, as I understand it, from the board.
And you
Yeah,
think,
if I may,
how long
go ahead.
did the Southern Claims Commission take? That was very big deal for several years to try to figure out if people were Southern sympathizers or not in the 1870s. Sorry, Dahlia.
No, you're good. No, I fully agree with what Greg said. I think in addition, you know, the big part of this, as you know, as historians, there's just so little of this that we know. Having grown up here, we learned very little of this history. So I think this will help start the education side. Also, in some of the research I did this month, learned that, right, it seemed like as both sides were coming and leaving our area, the few people who did stay here locally, you know, in order to just feed their families and survive, were, you know, supporting whichever troop was there. So I think it does get, from the little I know, it does get very tricky, and it's actually so fascinating. I did not know to the extent that, you know, there were really those front lines and how involved people were.
Otherwise, again, it just gets too messy, not to belabor the point. I was in Fairfax City this weekend doing research for the battle that occurred there on June 1st, 1861. And I happened to walk by the Joshua C. Gunnell building, right? Well, Gunnell, or Gunnell, however you pronounce that correctly, technically was not with the Confederate government. He was too old. He voted for secession. He was a secession sympathizer. He was arrested by the Union Army. I can go on and on and on. He sold, when he was sheriff, he sold slaves right at the auction block at Fairfax Courthouse. So you could define him as a bad actor in that sense, but he wasn't an officer and didn't technically join the government.
Right. So those things, like including Frying Pan Park, like those kinds of things are not going to be on our list. We're really gonna pin our everything on that Confederate names list.
I think we have to.
That's great.
I would agree that at this point, Fairfax was again a Floyd area, and so you had the comings and goings of all of the armies, both armies, all of the time. So another example is Sully, which was the Barlows owned it. They were Northern, and Jeb Stuart was camped there. So, you know, there isn't any clear divide. So I appreciate Supervisor Palachik's comments on it, so that we can, what we have is as Greg said, the well-known, the military, and any governmental Confederates, and that's what we're looking for.
Barbara, if I may, I have about 5 more minutes. I think I can stay on. I believe Aria can stay a bit longer.
Please,
But just
yes.
want to make sure if there are any outstanding questions today. Obviously, it can come back before I head out.
Are there any other? We really appreciate you being here and sharing in our discussions. Does anyone else have any question? Anyone else for Supervisor Palchik? That was very helpful just to have you here for this particular aspect. As you can see, we're trying to, you have people that love to research, and so it's frustrating sometimes because there's no end to it. So
No, I
anyone?
really appreciate it so much. And I know having those clear boundaries, keeping in mind that's today, years in the future, people may ask for additional information. So I think as you come across it, if you have a good way to store that, that will be helpful. But
Good.
really just so grateful for what you all are doing as our beloved volunteers for this tremendous project. But please reach out and ask Arya or Matt or Denise if you do have additional questions or essays.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you
you
all.
so much. We're
Thank
giving
you.
it our best effort. So thank you so very much for joining us today.
Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. All right, who haven't we heard from?
Mary.
Heard from, and we haven't heard from Mary. Okay, Mary.
Not much of an update because I'm waiting on the template decision, but I believe I already reported there's approximately 100 or 100 plus markers, and the resources that I've been using are the county list of historical markers online, the VDHR or the state list of markers online, Civil War Trails inventory list, which I got from the executive director, who has been in contact with me a couple times since he sent me the list. He wanted me to emphasize that what the Civil War Trails signs do for Fairfax County in terms of bringing his historically minded people interest into our county, et cetera. And he has statistics on average guests and what kinds stay in the county and look at them. But they currently have 1,200 trail signs in Virginia, Maryland, West Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Pennsylvania. So I just wanted to add that. So besides the Civil War Trails, for the historical marker database.org, I believe I went through about 400 and got a list of markers from there. Some of them are repeat History Commission or state, but others are plaques, etc. And getting a list of markers also from that include Northern Virginia Park Authority, Hunter Mill Defense League, etc. So I will at one point try and put it all together in one big list that I can work with. And I'm curious, when we get to the template, I'd like to contribute my ideas about the template.
Okay, thank you. So Mary, you could say that you have managed, as far as you can tell at this point, you have all your information. You're to the point where you need to know how to record it so that Denise can use it, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Good, thank you. Phyllis. Is Phyllis here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay. Steve Sherman and I are working on the street names in Lee District. And to be honest, we just started that this morning. Steve is confident that because he's a realtor in Lee District, he will know all of the streets.
Well, good.
I'm counting on him to do that. We're looking at the street names for Lee District, and we're going to compare that or balance that with Greg's list of Confederate names when that's completed. Beyond that, that's pretty much where we are. Once we go through the list and compare them, then we could probably work with the template.
All right.
It's a major project in between the other projects that I'm currently working on. So I can.
Well, I know it. appreciate you even, you know, joining us under those circumstances.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any questions of Phyllis at this point? I'm very glad Steve has stepped up to help because you're right, he must know Lee District quite well, so.
Well, I was interested in, this is Anne, I was interested in all the other lists that Denise has been adding to this list. You know, the subdivisions, the shopping centers, the golf courses, you know, just in case we thought all we 17,000 street names. But those lists would be dealt with through the data the data thing that Matt and Denise are working on. So it should spit out a pretty interesting list in a lot of different categories. Yeah? Okay.
Yes, the sort selection narrow down that list considerably.
Good.
So have I covered everyone?
Oh, me, Anne.
Herrick is here.
I thought
Carol?
I guess, yes, go ahead, Carol. Sorry, I had checked you, but you were commenting on, you were commenting
Great
on someone.
Falls.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
Well, I'm way ahead of this. I've already gone ahead and done quite a few of the streets in my district. And I've been using the template that we have, but we can always switch it around. And I've run into all of the problems that we've been talking about. I started out by listing the streets as strong, probable, questionable, and then toss out type of thing. But I've gone through all the strong streets, and I'm pretty much gone through the next stage, and now I'm down on kind of the questionable, possible type things. But I've run into names of families. Maybe somebody served in the Confederacy, and there's a street named after that family, but it's a family name. It's, and what are you going to do with that? And I've run into quite a few of those. I've run into the fact that this could be detrimental to families. We're several generations away from the Civil War, and maybe somebody's family served in the war, but here they are 4 or 5 generations away, and it's going to be on a list, that he served and changed the name of the street and whatever. So I've kind of run into that. When I fill out the sheet, I write quite a bit about why I have selected this person, or put it on a maybe list, or just tossed it out altogether. But I write quite a bit. There's quite a bit of time spent on each one of these, but I've run into every one of these things that we've talked about today. But I've probably got 50 streets maybe that I've done.
Wow. Do you think that's the that's sort of the total, approximately?
Oh no. I because, well, I'll give you an example. Anne will appreciate this. There's quite a few little sections in McLean called the Hamptons or Hampton or whatever. Well, I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue what that's about.
Right.
So I'm going to have to, that's on my possible list. You see, so my list of absolutes is probably about 20 right now, and then maybe 30 that I've looked at, and we need to sit down as a committee and discuss it.
Right.
And that's going to be something we're going to probably need to do for every district, and it would be a face-to-face type thing. We'd have to be at a meeting so we can pass stuff around and look at it. And but I've got quite a few of things. Do we or do we not? Maybe someone's father served in the Confederacy, but the daughter married someone in the Union. Well, what do you do here? It's complicated. But
Well, it
anyway, I've
does
done quite a few.
It
Right.
does show you gave me the Balls Hill Road as an example, and that's named after the Ball family, but there were Ball family members that were in the Confederacy. And so you raise a very interesting point, because that's not the only family where the road is named after the family, but if you look at what the family did, then they were involved. So
Well,
I think
in that case, we have 3 streets named after family members. So Dulaney, Mottram, and Swellen, Ball. But the street's named after Balls Hill Road is named after the families living on Balls Hill Road. But there's quite a few families like that.
right.
Carol,
So
I have a
Go ahead.
this is Tammy. I have a comment about that. Denise and I have talked about this. We were refining the template, and we were talking about the fact that it's probably going to be not just one list, but maybe a couple of lists, because, for example, the Cooper Road example, we actually ended up disproving that was related to Confederates. So to put that on a list called Streets Named After Confederates is incorrect. And so we want to make sure that if we still have questions about something, that we don't put it on a list labeled
Correct.
streets named after Confederates.
Oh no, this is a separate list. I've got the template list, and then I've got a separate list, and then I've got another list after that. And yeah, you're right, absolutely.
So yeah, we want to be sensitive to that, because when somebody goes to look it up, we want them to be able to find the information, because people are going to continue to ask questions about the naming of these monuments and streets and everything. So we want them to be able to find the answers, but we don't want to color, somebody's reputation, the street's reputation, if it's not true.
Well, and then that's important, that whatever template we use, we make that note, so Denise, when she is preparing the report, can point this out, that they're, the association, you don't want guilt by association multiple generations later. And the fact that, in this county, you have a very large number that lived here, continue to live here after the war, but were in the Confederacy. So
well, I figured at a later date somebody could decide what to do with all that other stuff, but at least it's in there.
We've always said we would have one of the biggest parts of this list be the ambiguous list, because there's going to be so many that share a name, but there's not a shred of evidence one way or another. Names like Hampton, there's so many British names like Windsor, who knows where. I mean, in some cases we will be able to figure it out. But Carol, I had never thought about some of the names in Vienna till happened to, in my view over the years, happened to have been also Confederate names, again because it's named after the families. So the Berry family, the Fallon family, old families that, oh yes, during the 60s they might have had Confederates. So that goes on the list somewhere, but I don't imagine we'll ever pin it down anything other than we're named it after the family. And like
Right.
Tammy says, we all are saying we don't want to tar the name because there was a third son who served as a Confederate. I don't know. It's all part of this template and the way that we decide to present it.
Yeah, when we get all the information put into whatever, then we'll sit down and we'll go over and we'll add stuff and we'll take stuff out and whatever. But I've got, like I say, 3 different lists here. But anyway.
Thank you, Carol. That's lots of work, and what you're doing is appreciated. I know that although Mike isn't here, he did text me and said that he is the only representative commissioner from Providence, and that he simply doesn't have the time to be able to handle the research. And so this is another aspect of our collecting information, is that I think we will have gaps in some districts because we just don't have the means of getting the information in a direct.
My district overlaps a little bit with his, and if I have overlapping material, I'll include it and just put it in. Yeah,
That's a good
put it in
point.
his district.
And we're adjacent, Barbara, too. So
Yes, I know.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Carol.
Yeah, I had thought about that earlier. Yeah, so we can probably cover a good bit of that.
That's another warm body. Aria, you'll have an idea.
So yeah, so there are definitely some looking into seeing who else can kind of you know, I know there's an open spot right now, and there's some we're waiting to hear from Supervisor Gross's office in Mason to see if another person will jump on, someone who could kind of help with that border. Providence borders, I think 4 or 5 of of the other districts. It's got quite the octopus shape as of now. So I'm sure you all have kind of parts that are overlapping a little bit, or many of you have parts that are overlapping. But that is important to know if we're feeling that workload is a little bit, it is feeling really overwhelming. And I've spoken with Mike before as well. And so I'm going to bring that back and see kind of what other options there are as well, because we don't want it to be overwhelming.
While you're talking to people, don't forget that we are not relying 100% on History Commission members. We've reached out to local historical societies, to individuals that we know this stuff. So let's all, I mean, like I always say, I really have to stare at Providence to really understand its dimensions. But we may know people from that district who would help, or who could, even if all they did is eyeball it and highlight some of the obvious ones, it'd be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right. Well, good luck,
Barbara.
And sorry, just before we go on, I just want to note, I have to jump off in a little bit to get to the next meeting, but I've appreciated hearing a lot of these things. And please, if anyone has a question for Supervisor Palchik in particular, do not hesitate to reach out with me to me. You have my contact information. Please, everyone who has feel free to share it.
Thanks, Aaron, so much for joining us today, and it's very helpful to us. So we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, y'all.
Take care. Bye. Denise, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say that Cheryl Rapetti is on the line as an attendee, and she jumped in to offer assistance with Providence District as well.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. And I'm sure that will make Mike feel better as well, to know that he has additional help. So anyone else?
Mary? Barbara,
Mary?
this is Mary. I grew up in Providence District. I'll be glad to help too.
Oh, good. We may end up with more from Providence than any of the other districts. That's great. If that covers, I think we get a really good sense. Thank you. A great discussion of where everyone is.
Wait. I don't
I'm
really
waiting.
have to make a report because Denise did it, but this is Ann, and I did contact all those people, and I thought you might want to hear some of the responses. Only one town. This is the research partners outreach. Vienna's super enthusiastic. Clifton says we'll put it on the agenda. Herndon is utterly silent. And in every case, I CC'd either one of you guys or the local historical society. Burke is enthusiastic. Bull Run Civil War Roundtable, Mark gave a very kind response. Said they'd be glad to particularly help show if there were just to be advisors on this process as well. Centerville, Historical Society of Fairfax County, McLean, I just assume, Mount Vernon, you know, it's been a very nice response. It's been about half that I've heard from. And that's out of 13 organizations and 4 individuals. So if anybody thinks of anybody else we might formally reach out to, do. In fact, we could send you the list of which organizations we specifically did, but you might have done that, Barbara.
I don't believe
And that would be
Denise has
great.
it.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's a little
I have it. I can
typical.
share it. I'm sorry, excuse me.
You send that on, would that be all right?
Yes.
That'd be great. It would
And
be wonderful for the
probably
minutes to have it'd be great to have the list of people who we sent to and who's responded and who hasn't, just so that we kind of know where we're at. I think that'd be great.
responses. And
Denise,
may I suggest that we send it to the full committee of the whole, to the full commission, so that they're all aware.
I did I hear Denise said she's going to forward that?
Everyone's cutting in and out as the storm comes, so it's difficult, but I think Denise heard.
I have a slightly updated version from a day or 2 ago. So I'll send the latest.
And this is Denise. Hi. So I don't have the updated version, and I also don't have the list of respondents. So perhaps it would be better, especially since it's going to committee of the whole, for you to send that information out.
Okay.
Right.
Just, you know, it's a table. It goes organization, contact, email, and follow up.
Perfect. Yep.
Do
Great.
that.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And I apologize to everybody for what appears like a sloppily run meeting, but it's very difficult because I cannot see anyone, and the voices come in and out. So I'm doing my best here. So now have I covered everybody as far as progress reports? If not, let's go into the current business, which is talking about the template. Which I think is its second generation.
Barbara, excuse me, it's Carol. I have to exit for a few minutes. I have to take care of a screen that's going to fly away. I'll be back.
All right. Okay. All right. Denise, I'm going to turn to you and Tammy and Liz as the creators of the second draft, and I think everyone has received it and has, I hope, taken a look at it. And I know Mary has some serious issues of how to use it for her information. So the idea again is that this is a tool, and I don't, and as I noted in my comments from last night, is that it's a guide. The important thing is Denise has to have a standardization of information. She has to have, and so even though we all research differently, it has to be a way that she can take the information and transfer it to what it needs to be. And so it's a challenge. So I will offer that. And at this point, I'm not able to do any research, so I'm simply listening and trying to help people move this along. And I open the floor to whomever, but since Denise, you and Tammy and Liz came up with the current draft that we're looking at, which is this one right here, if you want to talk to it. And then I know Mary has some ideas on how she would like to approach it. And anybody else that's, Carol, of course, is not here right now, but she was using it in its first draft form. So I'm turning the light on just a minute.
Okay, so I'll just quickly say that this is meant to be a tool for standardization. It's just I think that it's probably best to have one form that covers all bases, knowing that every field is not going to be applicable to every type of resource. Since we are covering names of streets and names of shopping centers and names of parks and names of other things. So knowing that those, all of those resources have different characteristics and not all of our fields are going to fit every resource, but trying to come up with one way to standardize the data collection. If, let me say right at the outset, if you have a method that you're using to collect data and it works for you, and it answers the same questions that the template answers, most of the same fields that are applicable, then by all means use whatever method you're using, and I can in some way integrate that into one standardized way of repository. Essentially, it's going to be an Excel spreadsheet. And then from that spreadsheet, we'll be generating the reports that we're going to use for the Board of Supervisors report. All of that, all that being said, Tammy and I went through this, her first draft. She did an excellent job of creating that original template, and did a large amount of research, but we know that 16 hours of research to find out the name of one street name and to find out that it wasn't named for a Confederate is unreasonable. It's just not, it's not reasonable. So I put a time amount, I just stuck it up there. This is a straw man. We can talk about all of the things that are on this template. So I put 1 hour to complete the template. And I'm hoping that it takes a lot less for most resources. I think that 1 hour is for things that we know it's Confederately named. And we're just going to have to do the deep research of how it got its name, what the intention was when the thing was named. So with that being set up, I'd like to let me just say, Tammy started it. She and I discussed it. We refined it. Then Liz and I discussed it. We refined it further. Then Barbara and I discussed it, and we refined it further. So this is the 4th iteration of this template, but also trying to be respectful to the original intention of what it was supposed to be used for. So I'm open. I'll open the floor if Tammy wants to say something, because it was her idea, and these fields are essentially hers with a little tweaking.
And before Tammy talks, I just want to thank her again. I've thanked her, one-on-one, but really this was an incredible effort, and we're just very, very appreciative, because the collecting is one thing, but the compiling and allowing it to be integrated is another. So Tammy, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And my goal in starting to do the template was, as Denise says, just standardizing what we're looking for. And
Right.
And I wasn't so much worried about the format. These may end up being the headings on the spreadsheet, and that is fine. The idea was just that we're collecting consistent information across the board. So yeah, so I'm thrilled that you guys are using it and have made it more useful and geared toward our activity.
Okay. Any thoughts from anybody? Mary, let's see if anyone else has comments, and then I will go to you if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Anyone else that's attempted, I know Carol has used it and she had to excuse herself for a bit, but I don't know if anyone else has gotten to the point of actually using it yet. Beyond Carol. If not, Mary, you have the floor.
Okay. I came up with one that I felt comfortable with, and I'd be glad to share it with people. I don't know if you want to hear it right now, but doing markers and monuments, etc. The big priority is the text, and that's 100 words for each one of them. This information is available online, and so what I did for my little thoughts here is to address, first of all, the title of the marker, which could be Mosby's Midnight Raid, give a quick little summary of what that was, not the entire text. And then in notes, the one that I actually did wasn't Mosby's Raid, but was Action at Annandale. My notes included no military leaders' names are included, just Union, regimental, and unit names. And then, of course, I have the location and when it was installed. Sources would be a very big challenge for me. There are at least 13 of these, of which Jack Hiller has a file folder, and included in that is every newspaper article, every documentation that was used to produce those 100 words. So it would take me quite a lot of time to get through and do all the sources for this. So that's what I'm putting out there, and I'd love to hear people's reactions.
I would suggest that for everyone, not only are we prioritizing what we're listing, but within our list, we're prioritizing what it is, what information we're providing, and what is essential. I know that one of your early questions, Mary, to me, I saved it in my notes, was how much of the text of particular markers has to be included. And
right.
So that I pass on to people. Anyone want to speak to this?
This is Tammy, and I think that
Yeah.
sounds like what Mary has done is terrific, and markers are different from some of the other things that we're looking at. I'm very comfortable with under sources, just putting Hiller files, just as a place where we know where to get stuff, and it's going to be the same for probably all the markers.
That's true. Yeah. There's Chris Babachak has a finding aid, and I can get the exact name of what they're called at the Virginia Room.
Well,
I'm back. It's Carol.
Carol.
I'm back.
We're on the
That's all right. I'll figure it out.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead.
You I think are the only one that's actually used it to this point. So Tammy, did you have anything else there? No. Okay. I would say
I thought it was very good. There were sections that I didn't need, but I figured it would all iron itself out, and I can always transpose it later on to something that's new.
All right.
But yeah, it's quite windy and quite raining here. Quite a little storm.
Yeah, it's really gusty in my house. So
in Reston, it's pitch black. It's pitch black here, as though it were night.
Yeah, it's like an eclipse. So this is Ann talking, and my just listening to everybody Mary talk about the modified template. I agree with Tammy that markers are kind of their own category, and if they have a slightly different format and include different information, I think that's okay. If Denise is the one pulling this together, you're the one who's going to have to say, make it make sense. But I could see having just a separate section of this report that deals specifically with markers, in which case it could have whatever. It could be different from the standard the standard template.
Well, what I'd like to do is send this to Denise and the whole committee, whoever wants. I can send a blank one, and plus example. I have a couple of examples of how a marker would fit into it, because I'm identifying whether it's a history commission or Civil War trails or whatever, and get people's reaction to it.
So Mary, Barbara, if I may, this is Denise. Mary,
Yes,
I
please,
have
go
a
ahead.
question. Thank you. I have a question for you, Mary. Are you the only person who is collecting information on markers and monuments?
Yes, I volunteered to do that.
Okay,
Yes.
so then, yeah, I think that whatever form you would like to use is absolutely fine with me. And I think to Ann's point, markers are different because you're collecting information on the entire Civil War, both Confederate and Union. So they're different anyway. So I'm absolutely fine with whatever format you would like to collect that information in. I would like, I think that it would be important to say what type of marker they are, but I can take a look at your form and maybe you and I can discuss if there's something that, doesn't need to be there or I feel like would be important, that's not there. And you and I can just talk offline about it if that's okay.
That's fine, yes.
Yes, Denise, what I was about to say was that it really would be your final call because you have to verify that it has the information that you will need. But I certainly would second that and support it because yes, Mary's the only one with all of the markers and everyone else is dealing with places and buildings and streets. So.
And Barbara, if I may, this is Liz. The one thing I would say is for anybody who's doing this, just to make sure for, Denise is going to have just an avalanche of materials at the end. So make sure that these high points that are reflected in the form are actually called out. So she's not having to go through multiple pages of, text and try to pull out the information. So, just so that it can be transferred easily. And certainly, it's a, appreciation of the background research that's done, but, there's multiple purposes for what's being collected.
Thank you. It's the priority of what is most critical and what the supervisors ask for. I think when we all started the quantity, I mean, when Denise is listing the numbers are astronomical of 17,000 streets and how many buildings and how many, all of it. In fact, I even missed some because the list is so long. So almost 8,000 subdivisions. So the size of all of this is can get overwhelming, particularly when we think again of our time frame. So I think that's a very good point. So do I take it that the sense of the committee is we will go with this concurrent draft and that Mary will share what she has with Denise and see if it needs to be adjusted a little bit. I've just seen it as really as part of an email. And that we will go forward and we will use this. We need to get the template to the committee of the whole as soon as we can. And my other question is this what we want to share with our research partners? We don't want them to look at it and say, I can't do this. That's too much information. But on the other hand, this is what we need. So your thoughts on that?
I was wondering in terms of when I start working on Braddock District and Providence District street names, there's some things there that I would have difficulty knowing where to search. And I think I expressed this to Barbara that if we don't want to inundate Denise with all sorts of questions, if there is someone like Tammy who's been through this, besides the Circuit Court archives, if there's a way to, we could find out when the street was named, et cetera, so that we're not always bombarding Denise with questions about this and make us a little cheat sheet or whatever.
Well, it's a good question. Denise, do you think, I sense that the when it was named is a secondary bit of information, but I may be very wrong here.
Well, I think the when speaks to the friendly amendment that was tacked onto the board matter. And Supervisor Harrity wanted to know about the whether they were named in the 50s or 60s, I believe. So I think the when is trying to answer that question. And I think that again, that goes to the centennial, is it just because that Fairfax was just exploding at that time? And at the same time we were celebrating the centennial. So,
Yes.
and I think that's what I believe. It's hard to tell, but I think that might be what Supervisor Harity's friendly amendment was trying to get to. And that's why we included the information about what the date of the name thing was.
Things, this is Ann talking, and when we discussed this at our meeting with Supervisors Alcorn and Palchik, this was always one of the weird ones, the questions we weren't sure about. So yes, they want identification when it's, how did they say it? If it's available, if the information, if we could list the decade when it's named, if it's available and doesn't slow down the process, are the words that were spoken. If I look at my notes at the time, and they're gonna want, yeah. Oh, listen. We might want to get off this call.
I'm going to hang up.
Carol. Oh, I can hear you. Very difficult. Lisa, I can't hear. Can you?
I think we may have lost our quorum, which would mean that we would need to end the meeting.
Carol. And we lose Greg?
Yes, and
Yes.
Liz put in the chat that she got an emergency alert, which I think was that sound that we heard.
So I think we no longer have a quorum, so we need to end the meeting, Barbara.
All right, then I will move adjournment, and I will propose, Ann's suggestion was that instead of a next meeting, that we have progress reports on a particular day, but we will have to, I think, discuss this in another forum, online, if that's feasible. Denise, I don't know.
You can, let's see, because there's not enough people in the meeting to discuss the next meeting.
Okay.
Perhaps talk offline and we'll figure out a strategy for getting everybody together again.
All right. Well, I thank everyone for their patience. We are going offline, and thank you all for your work and your creativity and all of it. It's much appreciated. And everyone, please take care. Matt, I hope you enjoyed it.
Yep. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, we appreciate your help.
Right.
Matt, are you available now? Can we just stay on? Okay, great. Thank you.
Should I go?
Yes, we're going to talk data, Barbara. So.
Yep.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Denise, do you want to stay or go?
No, there's no reason for you to. We're talking details in the data.
Okay, great.
All right, that's good.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, hi, Matt. I think I had the time right, correct? We had talked about meeting after this meeting.
Yes, I think this meeting might still be recording right now. We wanted to do it here over a separate Teams meeting if that impacts that.
Hang on for a second. I just need to stop recording. Thank you so much for reminding me.